very exclusive market at the time. There wasn't a lot of people wanting to do Cro-Mags and Suicidal, so it was my thing.
Ghost Cult Magazine welcomes in the great photographer of bands and other things, Gene Ambo. How are you doing?
How are you?
I am fantastic, man. It is a pleasure and frankly an honor. I have followed your work in the community of band and concert photography forever. So it's really
Thank you, man.
this is I'm having a moment.
Likewise.
Yeah, I shot concerts for many years to varying degrees. It's a strange life. We probably grew up on the era of great photographers and like the big rock magazines. And the last 20 or 30 years, we're transitioning away from physical media. There's still a few great mags out there, and some are coming back apparently. But at the same time, I feel like the value and the interest in art, it's never gone away. People always want to shoot bands. Bands want to be photographed. It's part of our ecosystem here in music journalism.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, man, you have this incredible book coming out of your work, which I'm super stoked. Access All Eras, Heavy Metro. I said that backwards, but it's Heavy Metro Access All Eras.
Right.
With the clever nod to the Metro for Chicago. So yeah, man, it's a very exciting thing to have this book of your work coming out. Why is now a good time to kind of get reflective and put out a book of your work and your history?
Well, I've been wanting to do something for a while, and when the COVID hit and people were kind of not working, I wanted to do a gallery show and maybe sell prints and social setting for, you couldn't have people around anymore. Everybody was social distancing. So I had all these files ready to go, and I was reminded that it was their anniversary. So I thought maybe putting out a book would be good. And initially it was all the bands of the Metro, which was probably way more than we needed to see, so I kind of narrowed it down. So Timbuk3 didn't make the cut. But if you see the book, you'll see a lot of repeat offenders, like Faith No More was there 3 times, with different lineups. So you'll see the 3 different versions of that and stuff, Smashing Pumpkins, just stuff like that. So
nice. You are a well-known documenter for those who are unaware, and we will link everything in the descriptions, where to buy the book, where to follow you. But for those not acquainted, get acquainted now. Gene is a documenter of concerts and band photography for many, many decades. Very influential in your style, and you just happen to be at the right place at the right time and interested in heavier genres of music. You shot some of the earliest photos of Metallica on tour ever, outside of the Bay Area or Los Angeles, and as well as many bands, a lot of hardcore and punk bands who never would have gotten in front of the lens of a photographer. If anything, they were probably, I wonder if there was a clash sometimes of aesthetics between bands and just genre types of folks, because, I've met some who are like, no, please, no good photography of my band. I'd like to be in the dark.
Well, it's weird. In Chicago, there was a really great mix between the metal and the hardcore scene here. So there was a lot of interaction, a lot of mixing up. So, I would just show up with my cameras, and I shot bands I liked. So I kind of narrowed it down to that. So it was very exclusive market at the time. There wasn't a lot of people wanting to do Cro-Mags and Suicidal, so it was my thing.
And no, these are not the days of the barricades. Even with the Metro being the great venue that it is, and I have visited once when I went to Chicago a few times, and I felt gleeful to be there, just like I would be at CBGB's 930 Club,
Well, yeah.
Gilman, anything. But this is not the time of barricades. You shot a lot of shows just in front of the chaos. Any fear?
Oh, yeah. There were times I would just, when I would feel I could get away with it, I would bring a chair in the middle of the pit and stand on it and blast out as many as I could, before things got a little too hectic. And, the Metro, I've been shooting there for a long time. So the sight lines have changed a little bit. They put up this little fence in the balcony to kind of protect people from falling over, but it changes the sight line of that from when I did Black Flag to now. It's a little different. Some of the angles are different. But yeah, back in the old days, it was a lot of broken equipment, a lot of broken flashes, a lot of damage, but a lot more excitement.
True, and danger. And again, I think people don't appreciate the ease of, and again, I came up in the era of the digital camera, but all my heroes shot on film, and you didn't really know what you had. Depending on your facility as an artist and a photographer, you didn't really know what you had until you got home and developed the film or
Pay
some.
later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really expensive. So in the very early days, like I really didn't have a lot of money for film. It was, beer film. So there was this compromise of, you know, 32-ounce beers and a roll of 12 exposure, and sometimes they had to wait a couple of days just to process it. And like you said, you didn't really know what you had until you got it the next day. And it took me a long time to figure out, how to use certain films and what magazines would take. Cause now that you scan anything and they'll take it. But back then they would only take slides or big black and white prints. So it was kind of a trial and error moment there for year or two, and really expensive figuring out stuff.
I'm trying to think back and scan my brain, my very lacking of coffee brain, about when I first saw your work. But I know you shot for all the big mags and smaller ones too. What was your first couple of exposures to the world? No pun
uh,
intended.
yeah, my first one in the States, I think it was a Hit Trader thing. It was a Raven shot of Wacko holding a drum, but I really got into it more in Europe because I was courting Kerrang, and back then there was Enfer in France and Metal Hammer in Germany, and those guys were printing all the stuff I was into. They were looking for Suicidal, Cro-Mags, and Metallica, Anthrax, all that. Most of the American magazines were still stuck on Van Halen, and that was actually one of my big breaks in the U.S. was I had wanted to shoot Van Hagar, and their publicist would not let me. So I had my friend sneak a camera in, and I blasted a bunch of photos, and I sent them to Circus Magazine, and they printed them. And suddenly I got a call from the Van Halen publicist, and she was very curious of how I was able to get these great photos in a 3-page spread in a magazine without having a photo pass. So I just told her, my friend snuck it in, and that's how it happened. And they're coming back in another month. We can try it differently, or I could do the same thing. And that's when she started giving me passes. So
Kids, don't try this at home. Typically, as a person that manages other photographers, along with my partner, Omar Cordy, who is my photo editor here at Ghost Call, we work with a team of photogs around the world, and we try to go through the publicists and the labels because that's the hierarchy today. But
sure.
wasn't always that way, and it was a little more loosey goosey and guerrilla style back in the day. And
Absolutely.
also, again, if you had a relationship with a venue, I know plenty of people from when I grew up who shot at CBGB's or Continental or Coney Island High, and they just roll in and they would just, hey, shoot what you want
Right.
and send some to the band if you can, and share a printed set if you thought you were, bring photos the next time and show them to the band and ingratiate yourself. So that's how it was done back then.
Yeah, I mean, that was for the bigger bands. Like bands, when I started doing Metallica and Anthrax, we were just kind of buddies hanging out, drinking beer, and I had a camera, so it was just a lot different, a lot more laid back. Now, like you said, everything's very regimented. There's a lot of captains at the helm. Everybody wants to have their finger in the pie and say, I got that, that placement for you. So publicists and managers and everybody wants to be upfront on that. So a lot more difficult to get things done, is in my opinion. So
Right. I also feel like I came up in the era myself as a photographer in the full age of the photo release and a lot of rules and strictures that probably were never in place. And
right.
I fully respect that. And we'll usually within reason, we will sign most releases if they're not super rights grabby or terrible. But some of them are just terrible. So I
Right.
wanted to get your take
Like
on some of them.
Kiss is the worst. They want everything, and they want you to hand it to them at your expense. But it's Gene Simmons. Who do you expect? So.
Right. As a lifelong member of the Kiss Army, I'll do my Gene, which is like, we will own your photo in perpetuity on any platform that evolves in the future. It's like scary.
Oh
In outer
yeah, yeah.
space, throughout the universe, forever.
Yeah, yeah, and people go out and do it, and that's kind of destroys what we do as journalists for But it's what the game is now. There's so many people that want to be in the pit, and they'll work for free and give everything away, and it just kind of sucks for me and most of my guys. But that's how it is, and more power to the people that can get it out there.
Mm, I agree, and I think also with I love the technology. It's enabled a lot of people to come into an art form that I love and grew up loving, reading the early magazines and even into the '90s. I loved a lot of the rock and metal mags that had phenomenal photography. Will always draw someone in to buy a front cover or a spread, but at the same time, yeah, there's a give and take between I don't want to be a barrier. I don't want anyone to not feel like they can't come in and learn the craft and be a photographer, but it's a whole different animal today with digital.
Yeah, it kind of sucks when you're in the pit. They're only letting, like at a big festival, they only let like 20 people in the pit, and you see 5 guys in there with their iPhones. It kind of sucks. It just, and then you have to jump through all these publicity hoops and all this crazy bullshit just to help the band that you like out. So it gets difficult at times. So I just don't even. It's a take or leave it attitude now. Either we're in or we're not. It works usually better for their interest if I'm in. If they don't want it, you can go with the new guy. I don't care that much. So
Well done. My personal gripe would be I don't want to mix. Photographers have a hard enough job to get shots of a band that are unique and special to themselves based on a lot of factors. I don't like having to compete with VIP people. You mentioned iPhone people, which I frown upon. I don't think anybody should be taking more than one photo in the pit. If you want to take a cell phone photo in the pit, maybe you should do just one at the end as you're packing up to go, but that's it. But I don't like having to not mix with them, but I just don't like having to compete for physical space in the
right.
mosh pit with VIP people. Like, let us get our three and out with no flash and let them come in for the rest of the set. They're not going to complain. They're thrilled to be there. We have a job to do, and and then they're mad at us for being in their way when we're there
Oh
to do a
yeah,
job.
oh yeah, and it really affects when you get into the big festivals like Riot Fest and Lollapalooza and Rock on the Range and all those, because there's people coming from all over, and everybody wants in. Everybody wants to know. You got 40 guys in the pit for 3 songs, and just gets a little crazy. So
Yeah, Chicago was really the first place in America to have a European style open air concert in the heart of the city, which is, I was always surprised at and impressed knowing how tight knit Chicago is as a town. It's just tight.
yeah, well, and it's really interesting because most of the city is, the Living Color guys pointed out that our city is really only half of the city, a quarter of a city, because there's the east is just the lake. The South is just a whole other animal, and they really don't do much there except a couple of the bigger stadiums and the outdoor sheds and stuff. But there's not a lot of little independent concert halls other than Reggie's. And on the north side, there's, a bunch of them, so it's a very neighborhoody gang kind of thing here.
Gang is the operative word. Chicago is always like a very. I always found it, is surprisingly welcoming when I came in. The community of people there are journalists and photographers. It's everybody kind of knows each other. It seems some new people now, but back in the day, it seemed like it was a very small, tight community. Because again, I'm from New York and Boston, and that's where I cut my teeth, and it was huge. There was like 40 people, and you might see the same 5 or 10, but there might always be a big show, like if Anthrax came to town or Metallica, and it was like 40.
Right. Yeah, I think Chicago's the happy medium between New York and San Francisco. Honestly, it's got that, the metropolitan factor of New York, but it still has that kind of a home gang feel of the San Francisco tight knit community, kind of artists and creative types and educators kind of thing. So I like it.
Just out of curiosity, what made you pick up the camera in the first place? Did you see somebody else's photography? Did you see
Yeah,
a
actually,
band?
Yeah, my friend was taking photo classes, and he was getting into some darkroom stuff. And I was hanging out with him, and I thought it was kind of interesting, you know. And so my dad was a photographer, but I got one of his old cameras, and I was taking pictures of, you know, stuff, you know, sunsets and girls and graveyards and, you know, trees and shit. And then I started taking pictures of my friends' bands because, you know, I was there and they were jamming poorly, but I thought, well, that was kind of like on what I would put on my walls at home. And then I started taking pictures of my friends' bands and, you know, sneaking a camera into a show here and there and climbing over the seats to get up in front and get that shot. And, you know, after a handful of those and just keep doing it, you just started getting a little file together and send it to a magazine, and there it is, you know.
There it is. Yeah, people. Again, I think it's a whole different animal today. It's very interesting. If you had to name a single artist that you enjoy photographing the most in concert, is there one?
Oh yeah, I mean, I always love Metallica because they were one of my first, and they just know how to really put on a great show. It's always great lighting; they never disappoint. I mean, that's one of those bands. When I'm shooting, I'm not really listening because I'm focusing and paying attention, waiting for certain things. But you know, that's one of those bands. You just put the camera down. You just got to watch a little bit. You know, just fanboy it out right there. Just get there and stare. You know, so they're one of the favorites.
Right on. I always felt happy to be there in the pit shooting. Like it's exhilarating and like a big high. But how do you feel since you're very business like you say? How do you feel about people enjoying themselves a little too much
Oh
in the
yeah,
pit?
you got to. I mean, that's why we're there. That's what it's about. You know, you know, it's feeling your gut shake from the fucking bass and kids screaming in the back of your ear, and you're trying to focus. That's what it's all about right there. You know, I love it.
Nice. How loud was it to shoot Lemmy like right in front of Murder One that
Oh
cavity?
man, I remember actually that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to get into photography was I had gone to see Motorhead, Ace of Spades opening for Ozzy, and I was there to see Ozzy. You know, Randy. I was just finding out about the Motorhead from the dirty, greasy, drunk guys snorting acid in the front of the line, and I was like, oh, okay. And then when Phil Animal came out, and I saw those jaw drums, those and heard that double bass, and man, my ears just fucking freaked out, and my head just got smashed, and I couldn't even hear Randy anymore. I was just so stuck on that pounding drum sound that Phil was putting out. It just changed everything for me right there. It was very memorable. Aragon.
Ballroom, yeah, of course. And been so
Yeah.
many. Well, I think what's interesting is that photography also has a place in the prevalence and the rise of live albums and album packages and DVDs and Blu-rays because there's always that money shot, trying to get the room shot. Do you have any advice or stories about trying to get into the back of the room after you've shot your 3 or 5 or 10, and then get the shot from the back of the room that
Oh,
sometimes
you
is the
mean
big.
off stage stuff?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I would always request sessions when I would do my live stuff. That was like one of the first things I would ask for is, you know, if they have 5 minutes before or after, you know, like to get a sweatshot. And in the old days, like you just kind of cruise in the dressing room because nobody gave a shit. You know, just go in there, kids were there, and just kind of pull people aside. Hey man, can we take a picture of you guys? And everybody was pretty cool. Nobody cared that much. It was just like, oh yeah, it was fun. You know, it was easy going, not that big of a deal. Now it's, you know, everything's got to be organized and, you know, a little more intense. But
Right on. And I'm sure back in the day, people didn't carry around lights and stuff. I think it was just you and your camera, and you just roll in and hope for good lighting and try to get something interesting, right?
yeah, well, I mean, I got into lights very quickly because I realized that lights made completely different photos. You know, it wasn't live and everything wasn't outside. And, you know, I was a kid, I used to look at magazines, and now that I was learning the trade, I wanted to know how they made that shot like that. And lights were the answer, you know. So I bought lights pretty early on and used the shit out of them. I drag them to every show I was doing, whether I was shooting sessions or not. I would have them and, try to get people interested.
Right on. And do you feel being kind of centrally located where you are in a major city that a lot of bands come in and they want to get photographed at one of those iconic locations? Probably not a good idea with tourists and stuff.
I think it's really that is one thing that's great about Chicago, because when bands go into LA, New York, and those big publicity label cities, I call them, they're usually really inundated with press, and there's not a lot of scheduled time open, and it's usually designated for real big projects that they're trying to promote or work on. So being in Chicago, it takes it off that beaten track, and it's still a big city where we have the stature and the venues to support the artists, and now they have a little more free time here because it's the middle of the tour as opposed to the big label cities where they're always tied up. So I think it really works good for me.
Awesome. And just for a last question, of course, you've been great and I appreciate you. Obviously, it's a huge field. It's not always a successful field. What advice can you give to somebody starting out today for who wants to be a concert photographer?
Well, obviously focus is a main thing. That's how I really got hooked into magazines, because they said I had great focus, and that back then it was manual, so it was a little harder, and it helped me stand out because a lot of people were still focusing on buttons and strings and shit, and their eyelashes were not clear. So focus and just being patient, waiting for the shot. You just got to wait it out. I was lucky enough to hook up with bands, and when you get into a starting band and you're helping them out and they're using your photos, and next thing you know that they're doing dates on the road and you're out there with them, and that's how it starts, just helping out your buddies.
Nice. Goodwill, pay it forward. Sounds like be professional. Help yourself, help others, and it sounds like good advice. Gene Ambo, it has been a thrill and a pleasure to talk to you, man. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, Heavy Metro, Access All Eras is coming out this summer, and we will link everything in the description. Once again, thanks so much for hanging with Ghost Cult. We really appreciate you.
Dude, thank you, man. Enjoy San Francisco. It's one of my favorites.